Hello, I'm James Preston for Kalkine Media, and welcome to another edition of Executive Corner Expert Talks. In this edition, I'll be shining a light on Renegade Exploration. The best way to do that is to sit down with Executive Director at Renegade, Mr. Robert Kirtland. Robert, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Robert, great to have you here. For those who aren't familiar with Renegade, could you give us a bit of an insight into what your company focuses on?
We've been repositioning the company for the last couple of years away from other projects that we were involved in. And our primary focus now is copper and gold. And mainly, or almost 100%, I should say, in the Queensland Mount Isa area.
Yeah, terrific. I mean, there is plenty of areas there to explore that are rich in minerals and some of these natural resources. So it's a very good spot to be focusing your operations. Now, one thing we have seen is that copper prices have been absolutely on fire lately. How do you see the metal performing in the short to mid-term, especially with the backdrop of the Eastern European crisis at present?
Copper, our pivot to copper is one that we've done with a lot of thought. And it's something that we've been working on for several years, to be frank, trying to find copper projects that we thought we could get into. We've in fact targeted advanced projects. That's the name of our game. We try and pick up as much data as we can and not spend too much money on grassroots exploration, which is tough for juniors. Copper has been strong for the best part of the last 3 to 5 years, and that's the reason that we're in it. Of course, the whole electronic vehicle has added another dimension to it. So we've got leverage to that, but we also see major supply issues with it. And I've got a little slide here to take a look at. You can see that chart. Well, I can't actually because my ugly mug's on it, but you can see that chart, how particularly in the last 2 years, it's been very strong in that sort of $9,000 to $10,000 range. Which translates on the currency to around anywhere from 11 up to $13,000 Australian, which is fantastic for us. You know, the $8 stays low, that's great. I think most viewers will probably be across copper and basically, you know, we're seeing ongoing deficits with no new major discoveries. We've been here before. This all sort of happened, you know, last time this all happened, I've seen it in the 90s. I've seen it in the 2000s, and we've seen it again. So no major new discoveries. There are cost pressures on everyone, including us. But we see it as a fantastic time for us to be involved in copper and also gold. So we think gold also has some very strong fundamentals. And coming back to your comment on the Ukraine, you know, geopolitical uncertainty is probably at, you know, all-time highs. Certainly I haven't really seen them this high for quite some time, probably going back into the late 80s with Reagan and Gorbachev and all that sort of stuff. So great time for gold. So if we can get gold credits in our copper exploration, we're pretty happy. Just on the company and speaking still about copper and where our projects are, you can see where we are there in northwest Queensland. We're involved in 2 ventures, the Carpentaria joint venture, and most recently the North Isa joint venture, which is only just 30 odd k's north of Mount Isa itself. So we're in full-on mode on that project, and been working hard establishing a full-time base up there. I'm currently in Isa with 2 geologists, and we're beavering away here, getting this thing ready to drill.
Terrific. The progress is obviously something that you are looking to push forward and ahead with, because, I mean, it is a really interesting time, as you mentioned, with that geopolitical background. You're talking about Reagan and I suppose the Cold War era as well. Those are some of the last times we saw conflict of this magnitude. Do you think that rally can extend well beyond even, say, the resolution of this particular crisis, though? Will we see copper maintain that high level?
I think so, because it was at these levels. In fact, copper's been an underperformer in the current market, to be honest, in terms of the rally that we're seeing, or that we have seen out of nickel. Put aside the big short issue, but you know, nickel, you know, has done extremely well on the back of the tightening. Things like palladium stuff like that. Anything connected to, the fertilizers, anything connected to what Russia and Ukraine may contribute to, absolutely. We're not that big in the copper space. Copper, the bulk of production in the world comes out of Chile. Chile has its own issues, where, they've got a new government they're talking about again. Now, whether they will or not, I have worked in Chile, so whether they will or not is another matter, but they are talking about nationalising the mines there. So it's always a point of conjecture, and I'd have to say that most people I talk to suspect that won't be the case because it hasn't worked before and it probably won't work again. So.
I certainly think across the world we've seen the more governmental control, the less things seem to work out too well. You have a look at Venezuela recently, for example. Now, Renegade also recently announced the findings of the sampling and mapping program over the North Isa project, which you alluded to in that slide there. Now, together with the evaluation of non-public historical exploration data at the Lady Agnes prospect, how is the prospect itself shaping up?
Really good. When we came into this project, we only sort of signed this in early December, started work straight away, and the principal target there, if you rank them, you see on the slide, we rank them, 1, 2, 3, starting at the top. Tulloch, which is a very classic geological formation, and has got most geologists that I'm working with excited about that project. The interesting thing about it is the actual structure hasn't been in the hands of one party. So there's been permits running through the structure. So for the first time, the guy that I did this deal with, he actually put that together. So he's been looking at it, he's been looking at this for 20 years, right? So he's put it together, put the data together and kind of gone, yeah, it is what we think it is. And it's this classic horsehead structure, as they call it. We've got a fair bit of work to do on that, and we're going to start on that, literally now, this week. Lady Agnes kind of fell into our lap. It was interesting. It's a really nice outcropping structure. It's got an old oxide mine on it. They mine pretty high-grade material back in the day. So we're talking circa 100 years ago. And then there's been work done on it. And when we go into the Queensland mines department files, you find data there, and I've had calls from shareholders saying this doesn't look that good, and I said, well, you don't have what we've got. And our friends at Glencore, who we're in joint venture with at the Carpentaria joint venture, had done a substantial amount of work on Lady Agnes quite some time ago. So their old name, Mount Isa Mines, MIM. So they had drilled holes there and done IP as well. So they drilled some holes which fundamentally didn't go for the high of the target. So the high of the target is not much more than 100 metres below surface. They went underneath and they were targeting big structures. You have to bear in mind, MIM were looking for 50 to 100 million tonne ore bodies to make it worth their while. Not much has changed there. It's the same story now with Glencore, where really they need big major deposits to make things work. So we've inherited that data. We reprocessed some of it. We've looked at the drilling. It is deep, but what it tells us is there's actually a system there. There's a working system, and here it is here. So this is our plan view, and you can see the high is here. That drill hole starts at where they start intersecting this copper, and there's little high grade zones within it. It's a brecciated formation, so exactly what we're after. But there are higher grades in there, but we haven't broken them out and gone to market and said, oh, we got 3 metres at 5% or something at 400 metres, because quite frankly, right now it's not worth any money. What it's telling us though is if that copper actually pushes up into our target zone, and we'll be targeting 5 or 10 million tonnes. And if we can get a decent grade in there, we'll be very happy. It's also our expectation that we potentially run through oxides in that area. So the old boys were mining right here in the guts, and they were mining oxides. And that picture off there is part of the structure, and it runs this way. So the structure's running like this. So that picture there, I assume you can see the pointer, is part of that. So we'll be drilling from the back over here, from the front, and poking holes in it, because it's pretty much a sub-vertical structure. So it dips to the north, 82 degrees for the technical ones amongst us. You can see our soils are exactly as we would have expected, very high grade in the vicinity of Agnes herself. And all in all, we're pretty excited to get stuck into Agnes and see what she might give us.
Yeah, the plans seem to be rather far along. How many holes exactly are you looking to drill in this area?
Plan at the moment is 10. Up to, we can push down the rig, the driller we're talking to. It's got a multi-purpose, and so we could push down. So if we get into any sort of decent looking material, then we can push down to as deep as we want to go. But certainly most of the holes will go to 200 and up to 300 metres. So the program is roughly 2,000 metres.
Wow.
With about 10 holes. So just specifically into that target.
Yeah, well, that's actually quite substantial. Another thing that has been floating around with Renegade at the moment, of course, with discussions from investors and other people I've spoken to, is there is, of course, that 23% interest in the acquisition that you've made with the Carpentaria joint venture. What's the thought process behind that deal, though?
We started working on this way back. This was part of how do we secure some copper projects that may have a good chance, right? This came out of Sovereign Metals. So we know the guys there pretty well. Sovereign listed on this project way back in 2007, contributed for a couple of years and then stopped contributing. And they started off with 49%, MIM at 51%. And they've ultimately diluted down to this 23% when we picked it up. We closed on it in about May last year. So we still haven't had quite a year, but that doesn't mean we haven't been active on it. And we are contributing, and we are talking to our friends and colleagues at Glencore constantly about how we can add potential value to this. Around Cloncurry, you can see in that area, and we've previously announced this to the exchange, but there are some what we'd call low-lying fruit there, oxides, of no interest to Glencore. They're a sulfide guy, and they're way too small, so they could never ever make money out of them. We're very interested in looking to extract them from the CJV, as we call it, and work on them in our own right. And so we've been spending a fair bit of time talking to them, coming up with various proposals on how we can do that, so that we can start work on them, and they can get some benefit as well. And I think we seem to be moving a little closer towards that. But again, I'm hoping to catch up with their boss there in the coming days and sit down and perhaps we might close something. I think of interest to some of your viewers is that in that southern portion down there, 12180, we had a joint venture meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I guess one of the hallmarks of the CJV has been there hasn't been a lot of drilling really since they were drilling that Mongoose prospect way back in 13, 14. They did a little bit down there, down that way in 18, and they got some decent sniffs. At the meeting, the guys were saying that this is the biggest IP target that they've got on their books. So it is down there. I don't want to go neurology and nearism, but it is down in an area which nobody had ever heard of it before until Carnaby came out with their results from their Desperandum and also Lady Fanny. So Lady Fanny is an oxide play, not dissimilar to Agnes. And Desperandum is about 4 k's south, and that is potentially an IOCG or structurally controlled thing, but they've been getting some really good numbers. The CJV controls a big part of the major structure there, and as I said, big target. I didn't thump the table, but I sort of cried in joy when the guy said that they wanted to go and drill holes there, and I said we are right behind you, because if they can find anything of a decent size, 23% is very meaningful. And we will support that till the cows come home. It's a little bit like the area in that northwest. You can see Mary Kathleen, you can see the beacon tag there. And in that area there is also their focus, where they think they can find big deposits. And again, we've gone, yeah, we're all in, and we will contribute to that funding. And the more holes you drill, the better, because that's what we do.
It also seems like quite a good piece of business too. I mean, $350,000 isn't that much really for that 23% stake. How long do you think it'll take potentially to recoup that expenditure?
Well, I guess if I could put a drill hole into some of those oxide deposits, it wouldn't take long. But look, how long's a piece of string? Don't really know. I think the day that we can agree some terms with the Glencore guys is a happy day for them and for us, to be honest. We can get that off their books, so to speak, but still be working hand in hand. I mean, we would, whatever work we do there, we'd be passing all the data, because they can run it through their big modelling geological programs, and who knows, hey, as I see it, we're in a very good position. I think you hit the nail on the head. 350 grand's not a lot of money to move into an advanced project. And it was sitting within Sovereign. They were focusing on something else. They're taking stock instead of cash, by the way, which is pleasing. So they're maintaining their own leverage to us if we can make this project work.
Well, look, that only sweetens the deal, and I think it's potentially quite a fruitful partnership for you. So fingers crossed that you do see some drilling commencing reasonably soon. Now, another thing that's been mentioned surrounding Renegade is the treasury stock. Can you tell me exactly what that is and why it's important?
Yeah, so we call it opportunistic portfolio management. So in other words, if we're working on a project and we think that we can't maximise that project for the benefit of shareholders, and somebody else can, or we've got a really good offer and we can use those funds elsewhere, we will deal. Now, we've done it twice. We inherited an asset when we came on board into Renegade, or Overland as it was then called. We inherited an asset in the Yukon. It's a very difficult asset, in particular for a small company based in Australia. The Yukon, fundamentally, right on the border of Alaska. It was small, it looked constrained. It really belonged in a Canadian company, and we ended up. It took us a fair while, because Zinc's been on the nose, so it took us a good couple of years to find a sort of a willing buyer, with a couple of false starts along the way, as it happens. But we did do that, and we can realise at the end of all that, we end up with about 1.45 million in cash. So we've already had 750, which is great. That's helped us out with various programs that we've been working on. And of course, we also hold a 0.5% or 1% royalty, an NSR on that as well. So that's worth a bit of money too in the future, if those guys in Vancouver can make this project work. And it looks like they're gearing up that way. Zinc is having another day in the sun. So hopefully it will last longer than the usual days in the sun that Zinc has, from my experience. But of course, Zinc also is being talked about, talking about zinc batteries and all this type of stuff as well. So that's all good news, I think, for them and for us. We also had the guys at Strickland Metals, who had all the ground sort of north to us. They were looking at aggregating the whole belt. Now, we had a couple of parties interested. We picked Strickland. Geologically, they're very strong. They've got some deep pockets, because a lot of the work to be done out in the Yandal is under deep cover. And when I say deep cover, I'm talking, 20 to 50 metres. So a lot of money and time gets wasted trying to find out, what's going underneath all that without your typical outcropping structures. So they're working away. The stock's doing quite well. We ended up getting 800 cash, 40 million shares, and then a half % NSR. So we're very happy with that. and we'll just be sitting tight. The stock's escrowed in any event to the middle of the year, but we'll be sitting tight and seeing how they go. But they've also had a new discovery called Iroquois, which is south of all the Rumble Resources stuff. So that's base metals. So that's zinc and lead, and I think that's very encouraging for them and for us as a shareholder. And again, comes back to that leverage. We're leveraged all that stuff to the north now, as well as all of our old land holdings. Then, hopefully good news for them is good news for us.
Absolutely. Now, I mean, we've discussed a lot of your work in Queensland. That's obviously over there in Vancouver. Is there any more acquisitions on the way overseas or in Australia for that matter?
We're always looking. And I think on average, it's slowed down a little bit of late because we've got very busy in Queensland, but we would review 2 to 4 projects a month still that would come into us. Generally, they're varying difficulty. In the current market, there's 2 problems: A, quality; B, price. So quality's going down, price is going up. Now you'll find with this board we are quite conservative. We're not massive promoters. We're not out there beating our chest and telling a story and picking up ground, for argument's sake, in the lithium sector just for the sake of picking it up so that we can get a spike in the stock price. That's not our game. We are about trying to pick up projects which we think we can add value to and potentially bring to development and production. And what happens along that path, who knows? But given the advanced nature of the projects that we currently have, we're very happy. And if we put something together on CJV, we have got 2 to 3 years of work in front of us.
You mentioned there lithium. Of course, that's one of the key components of electric vehicles and all the new batteries that are being brought out now. Obviously, it has the longevity surrounding the metal as well, which is one of the key reasons why it's become so popular within that space. I know the focus is copper and gold, but is there much scope for you to sort of delve into that space, given there is this EV boom at the moment? Are you looking to capitalise on other potential metals?
We will always look. Personally, I was involved in graphite early, and graphite did quite nicely, and then lithium early, and I'm just speaking as an investor. Because at that time, lithium went through that absolute brutal phase where it had a nice big run. Some of us had sold out and thought we were geniuses, and then we bought back in, and then we thought we were geniuses selling out again last year, but of course it's kept going. Clearly, I do talk to some traders in that space, and they too are surprised by the demand in lithium in particular, and the fact that this rally has continued on so long. And they appear to be convinced. Now they're all leveraged, right? So take it for what it's worth. But they appear to be convinced that it can be maintained. I'm not. I kind of go, what could possibly go wrong? And it's had such an unbelievable run. But there are others in the space as well. So if somebody walked in the door with something that looked like a decent lithium project and needed money and help, sure, we are going to take a look. And we have. We've looked at a number. But we also like the look of vanadium, for example. So, in the work that I and we have been doing, the vanadium redox flow batteries appear to be a very good solution as well, and perhaps one for industry and perhaps even household use. Certainly not for vehicles and like, but it appears to be a very good solution. So we are casting our eyes around for potential vanadium deposits. And of course, depending which vanadium deposit type, style of deposit you get, you also have the potential to get HPA, or high purity aluminium, which is becoming a little bit of a flavour of the month metal as well. So yes, we are looking. We do like the sector, but we need to see something which makes sense. And we're not going to do a deal which is just an arm waver.
I think one thing that's definitely come across from chatting with you today is that Renegade actually seems like a rather malleable company, which is obviously, as we sort of started talking about at the very beginning, you were refocusing quite specifically on copper and gold, and that had become core to what you're doing. So yeah, there definitely seems to be that scope that you could easily shift into the space as it unfolds, and there is that open mindset. So I congratulate yourself and the board for actually having that approach, to be honest. Robert, been great to chat. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave with our audience and potential investors today?
Well, I guess I put up the key takeaways slide, and you can see, we've been talking about our refocus to the Mount Isa region, and why not? In reality, that whole region is still relatively underexplored. A little bit difficult in my book, but it's not the first time I've been here. But it's a little difficult. It's one of the problems versus, say, coming from Western Australia, for example. In Western Australia, if you do see some outcropping material and it's got something in it, there's every chance there is something down below. And who knows, maybe you got lucky and it's economic. Queensland, my complaint is that wherever you go, there's almost leakage of copper. So it can be quite disheartening. I know on a former project that I was involved in, which we sold nicely for the shareholders private. We sold it nicely, but the bottom line was there was a lot of copper. There's a lot of copper through here, and then you start sticking holes into these things, and in actual fact, there's nothing there, sort of thing. So, but that said, I think with the work that's going on up here, you see this with Hammer, Carnaby, and others. There's going to be some discoveries, and we hope to be one of those. And maybe it's Lady Agnes up front, or maybe it's something within the CJV. But we're very positive that we are going to get something that's absolutely viable and economic, and we'll get going. And of course, I guess in closing, we try not to raise money. We've only raised money twice in this company in the last sort of 4 or 5 years. Given this treasury stock and treasury positions that we have, we're hoping not to dilute shareholders. And some of us, some of the key players in the company, we've got enough stock in it to make it worth our while. So we're sort of thinking of ourselves, but if we're thinking of ourselves as shareholders, then we're thinking of everybody else out there as well.
I think that would be music to the ears of many of your shareholders, that's for sure. Robert, just before I let you go, where can we find all the details? What's the website?
RenegadeExploration.com.
Brilliant. Well, Robert, been fantastic to chat with you today. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Cheers.
Well, that's Robert Kirtland, the Executive Director at Renegade Exploration. And if you missed any part of that chat, you can catch the full interview on our YouTube channel, Kalkine Media. So make sure that you subscribe. I'm James Preston, reminding you to stay apprised and invest wise with Kalkine.